Hello, my gorgeous. Welcome to another episode of Natalia Benson, the podcast, the Saturn series. This is episode 2 of 3 of this very, very special series that I am bringing forward for you, really in honor of my Scorpio Papa Bear and his recent passing in Virgo season. So in this episode, I am going to talk about mediumship, NDEs, and understanding the other side. I used to be terrified of the other side. I actually remember one of the first sessions I ever had with Leo Max. And I literally said to him, it was the first session we ever did together. And I said, Leo, I am I'm not sure the words. Oh my gosh, there's the hummingbird again. Okay, you guys, signs the earth is oracular. Ever since I got home after my poppy passed, there's this green hummingbird that sits right on this branch, and it's like perfect eye line with my desk. And I just saw him or her sitting there. And I like to see those signs, and it only started since I got back. So that's really special. I just saw that out of the corner of my eye. So with Leo, I just remember saying, I am actually afraid of the other side. I'm afraid of the unseen. This was close to a direct quote. I was like, I am afraid of the other side. I don't want to be freaked out. I don't like any of that. I really had the attribution that the other side or the unseen world equated to something negative. Oh my God. To say that could not be any more incorrect. And here's why. Some of you may have heard my episode from, I believe it was last June, where I talk about going to the hospital, deciding to become a medium, to trust all of these mystical, metaphysical, paranormal experiences that I've had throughout my life, and to finally allow that thread of continuity to actually mean something to me, and understanding my natal chart actually. So house systems in astrology. So I've always used the Placidus system. It's just how I learned, and I just really like it. And that's how I've studied my entire chart. But I had a really beautiful conversation with someone on the internet, of course, and they were saying that whole sign, or when you shift your house system, it can be sort of this sign of an evolutionary shift, because while we don't need the house systems to be better than or less than, what's really, really cool is we actually can see a unique perspective on the soul blueprint dependent upon the house system that we're using. And from the esoteric perspective, the way that I look at that, and really from this conversation that I had, was the shift in perspective, or the evolutionary process of the soul, and whatever it is that you're ready for, perhaps what it is that you're needing at that time. The reason I bring that up is because a couple years ago, I had an astrologer named Aya Samadi. She read my whole sign chart. And what's interesting is that in my whole sign chart, my entire stellium that exists in Aries, it moves to the 4th house, which is a Cancer ruled house. The reason this is significant, and really I started to look into it, especially when I decided to finally acknowledge and accept this sort of, I've definitely accepted the mystical side of me, but going into the space of mediumship and fully accepting the other side and how it has shown up for me throughout my entire life was a really, really big deal for me, and really powerful for moving from all of that 3rd house, highly intellectual Gemini energy, communicative, into the 4th house, which is Cancerian, very deep, very watery, very, very different. And so I bring this forward because last year, and I'll have us go ahead and like link the show where I talk about this shift. I don't want to go too deeply into it in this episode since I've already talked about it at length in that episode from June 2023. But very, very simply, something that I began to recognize about myself was like, oh my gosh, I actually have this very watery, spiritual, very, very deep chart, especially with that stellium in the fourth house. And the fourth house is also so much about healing. It is so much about the other side. It's about connecting to our other lifetimes. All of these things that have been just really, really deep and profound in this life for me. So without going too much on an astrology fourth house transit, I want to speak into that because a year ago, my whole chart, my whole sign chart started to make an immense amount of sense to me. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's okay, my angel baby. Just look it up. Look up the difference between Placidus and whole sign in astrology. And if you use time passages or astro.com, you can toggle around with different house systems and you can look at your chart with different house systems, which is very fascinating once you learn, how to navigate your chart. So the reason I wanted to speak into this is because when I began to understand the mediumship abilities that I had, and I started to just really organically step into last year, the whole sign chart, this fourth house stellium, all the water, the eighth house, all the things, it just made a lot more sense compared to how I'd been studying my Placidus chart. In addition, I have Neptune in the 12th house. I believe actually in both systems, but I've got to look. And what is so, so special and so, so fascinating about Neptune in the 12th, and it squares my Mercury, is there is this powerful, very deep, otherworldly type of connection when you have your Neptune in a water house, because Neptune energy is very watery, and everything that we're going to be talking about today, Pluto energy, mediumship, loss, NDEs, getting the other side. And what's so quite prolific about me even talking about this is because I just used to be so freaking terrified of this stuff. It just scared me. Like, I always attributed it to something negative, but when I began to study mediumship, to learn NDEs, to literally watch everything that I can about NDEs. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. If you have no idea what NDEs are, they're so powerful. They're very healing. This healed my relationship to the other side. And as I said in the first episode of this series, I feel like if I did not have the vernacular that I've gained from studying mediumship and NDEs and all of the books and things over the last year, I think that I would be having a much, much different experience with my dad's passing. So if you've been on the journey with me, you know that I kind of stumbled into the mediumship piece. I was not planning on that. I literally was doing full blown business mentorship, all things spiritual business mentorship, business strategy. And I was getting burned out. And what is so special is that towards the end of the summer, when I just was okay, I had these meltdown experiences. I was in the hospital. I got really, really sick. And as I just had these sort of ego melting experiences, I was okay, you know what? This voice in my head and the conversations that I have outwardly, these are not for no reason. The most prolific moments of my life have been when I have spoken out loud and asked a question or asked for help, because that is the way that the other side and the unseen can support us. And when we stop being afraid of the unseen and we stop being afraid of not only the other side, but also the prolific power that is inherent in our voice and the prolific power of asking for what it is that we want help with, whether you call it your angels, your guides, your beloved ancestors. You speak directly to, like I told you in the last episode, I'm talking to my dad all the time, but I will share, and especially when I get into some of the synchronicities of my dad's passing after he died, these things are so uncanny and so miraculous that, again, it just makes you feel so remarkably safe and empowered to be the most magnanimous expression of yourself while you are alive on this earth. I want to talk about a scary experience that I had a very, very long time ago. So some of you may know my story, some of you may not, but in my early 20s, I was addicted to drugs and alcohol. I had undigested trauma from something that happened when I was about 6 years old. And I didn't realize that when I got into, let's say like 18, 19, but like especially my early 20s, my way to cope with that anxiety was to drink and to use drugs. I had like a crew that I had like my fun with, and we went to a house at a lake. And I remember basically that was a night where we actually didn't do any drugs. I think I was about 22 or 23. And I remember we just like went to dinner, drank wine, and we were all really tired because we'd partied the night before, and we went to bed. And we all were sleeping in this room, and there was me and like this single bed, and then there was another bed on the other side, and then people kind of like sleeping on the floor. And this was like a crew of friends that I spent a lot of time with. So I remember waking up at about it was the middle of the night, and another big group of people who I think they owned the house, who some of my friends knew, they all came home, and they were like raucous, like screaming, yelling, going off the rails. And I remember laying there, and I was sort of awake, sort of asleep. And I started hearing like this inner voice that was like, you are wasting your life. I'm so disgusted by you. It was literally so intense, but it was this voice that was like, it was me. It was just like, I can't believe like what you're doing with your life. Like you're partying, you're wasting away. I had a really hard time with like eating disorders then as well. So it was just, I was such a mess. And I'll never forget like waking up, hearing the meanness of this voice and the way I was talking to myself, and I fell back asleep. Well, I began to have a dream, and in the dream, I was awake in the room, but I couldn't see. And all I felt was something weighing on my chest and literally like pushing my energy down in such a strong way. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't scream, I couldn't talk, and I could not get this thing off of me. And finally, I don't remember what I did, but I just finally like struggled enough, and I removed whatever this was, and I got it off me, and I moved forward in the dream space, in the dream time. I looked out the window, and it was almost like it was morning, and I could see a rose with dew all over it. And I just remember being like, oh my God, I survived something. Like I'm going to be okay. And when I woke up the next morning, I had never had an experience that intense. I had things when I was younger, but never that intense. And I remember we were leaving the house, and we were driving back through the mountains, and we stopped at this look off. And I sat on this rock by myself, and I looked out into the expanse of the forest, and I said, whatever that was, this was its message for me. It was letting me know you are alive. I am not. You are squandering your vital life force. I would do anything to be alive again. And here you are, you're alive, and you are wasting your life. And there was some feeling of understanding and peace that I had from that very intense paranormal experience, where I just recognized that there was a wisdom that had come through that experience. Sadly, because of, I've seen 2 scary movies in my entire life. When I was 12 years old, I went to the movies with my friends and saw the last scary movie that I've ever seen in my entire life. When there are scary movie previews, I cover my eyes, I cover my ears. I do not let that into my consciousness, because very, very simply, the unseen and the spirit world and the souls of those who have departed this life, they are here to support us. Who are you talking to? Yes, but I am deepening so much more in this relationship because of Perdita Finn's work. I'm doing a workshop with her right now called Ancestral Collaborations, and I'm doing another workshop with her in October called Soul Appointments. And the reason that it's so wonderful that I found Perdita, so about 2 days after my dad passed away, I woke up in the morning and I was like, no holds barred, letting myself do whatever I want. I was like, if you want to wake up and lay in bed and stare at the ceiling, you can do that. If you want to get on your phone and scroll Instagram, like, you just do your thing. Like, you need to move how you need to move right now. And that's okay with me. But I woke up the second morning after Poppy passed, and my inner knowing, my guides, they were like, books. It's time to read. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator, Sagittarius moon. Like, studying, especially when I'm going through something challenging, is literally everything to me. So basically, I got onto Amazon and I was looking around for books about like the esoteric side of grief and the esoteric side of death. And I decided that I wanted to get as many books as I could, even some. There's one book that I got. Where is it? It's called Lucid Dying. I started to read it. I don't feel ready to read it yet. It's a little more scientific. There seemed to be, as I was studying and looking for good books, a lot of doctors and even neurosurgeons who are coming forward and writing these books, who are proving evidence of the other side through near-death experiences. This book, which I didn't get too into, was also written by an MD about the more, just really the fact that there is some continuity of consciousness that oftentimes the medical system, at least Western medicine, doesn't acknowledge and doesn't accept. And you hear this oftentimes when people talk about their NDEs, that when they come back and they speak about what's going on, the people around them are just, they don't want to hear it, or they just quiet them, or they consider it to be a complete psychotic break, like a psychotic episode. Oh my gosh. We will link one of my favorite NDEs. I will talk about it in a little bit on my favorite NDE YouTube called Coming Home. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. One of the most unbelievable experiences when this, I don't want to spoil it, but when he came back and he went to his psychiatrist or his doctor, and the doctor was like, I need to prescribe you something. But then the man who had the NDE basically had a mediumship experience. A lot of people say that when they come back and they have NDEs, that they come back with the ability to communicate with the other side and be a transmitter. And he basically transmitted a message. I don't want to spoil it. We will link it in the show notes because it's just, I pretty much every near-death experience, those are NDEs that I've ever seen, I'm obsessed with. I love them. They're very healing. This one, I was just in tears. I've watched it 4 times. Like, there's just something about it that is very healing, very powerful. We'll make sure to link it if you want to check it out. So what I was getting at is that as I was laying in bed and I was looking for all of these different books, I happened upon this book by Perdita Finn. And I don't know why. This is what's so beautiful about the way that we are guided. And I feel very, very strongly that this was my Poppy's, and I was asking him to help me heal and asking him to help me make sense of everything. because I was just feeling so deeply overwhelmed with shock and grief that he left so fast. And what was so powerful is I just happened to scroll down on Perdita Finn's book. I'm spacing on the name right now, but if you look her up, Perdita Finn, her work is so special. Actually, I'm just going to look it up right now. Perdita Finn. What was this book? Because this book I just bought it. Haven't got to read it yet, but like I said, I'm in her workshops. Okay, yes. This is why I clicked on it. Yes. Yay. Okay, I remember now. So the reason I clicked on her book is because it was called Take Back the Magic. And then I looked down, and again, I feel this is how higher guidance works, where we can't really hear why we're drawn to something, but we feel it. We feel it strongly. And I scrolled down and I found her website, and I noticed her website was called takebackthemagic.com. So I literally highlighted it from Amazon. I've never done this in my life. And when I opened up her website, I saw she had 2 workshops, soul appointments, and she's a remarkable writer. So instantly it was in my cart. I bought it. Then I saw she had one that was starting the next weekend called Ancestral Collaborations. And I was like, oh my God, this is starting. And I just felt this lightness in my heart where I was like, I know that this perhaps can support my grief process. I've never heard of this woman in my life, but I felt so drawn. Then I opened up this is going to segue into why I'm recording this episode, but I opened up this post on her Instagram, and I'm going to read it to you. Take Back the Magic, Conversations with the Unseen World, Perdita Finn, co-founder of Way of the Rose. So here's what the freaking caption says. The dead are real, and they want to collaborate with us. That is the message of my book, which will be birthed on September 12th and which is now available for pre-order. So many on the other side have helped me conceive of this offering, gestate it, and help it grow and midwife it into the world. Most prominent is my father, whose story it is as much as mine. It is the story of how, after he died, we find our way to inconceivable healing and miracles beyond measure. My editor's father also had a clear hand in guiding this project forward, as did my great aunt and uncle, my high school art teacher, and all of the many ancestors and saints and difficult dead I have met through the many workshops I've offered on the dead. I could feel them all clamoring to bring this message back to the living. The dead are real, and they want to help. I read that, and I got full goosebumps, and I just said, this is one of my teachers. And as I've started my work with her, I think we've already done 3 weeks. There are so many things that she said that has even more deeply healed my relationship to the unseen, to not be afraid to collaborate with the unseen. And for those of you, just like myself, who have experienced a death or a loss of someone that you've loved, whether they're close to you, a partner, a friend, a family member, a parent, a lover, you know that the death process, it does invite us into a deeper reverberation with the life process. And if there's one thing of so many that I'm learning through Perdita's work right now, it's really that all of the years and all of the times in my life where I have spoken out loud, someone that loves me has responded. And maybe I'll do an episode in the future. I'm going to kind of see how this flows and if I want to continue on and keep on with this show or evolve it into something else. I know that no matter what, if I do this podcast again, I will likely only do 2 episodes a month. That it's an old version of my Manny Jen Aries that used to be able to record every week, but that's just not the season of life that I'm in, at least right now. But we will really see. And I do also feel that I've been really inspired by a lot of podcasts and YouTubes that I'm into of finding people. I would especially love if they're in the NB community or beyond who've actually experienced NDEs and they can come and share them with us. because they're just, I saw someone's comment on my favorite podcast that talks the most about NDEs is called Next Level Soul. It's on YouTube. Alex Ferrero, I think, is the host. He's so special. He has a lot of people who come on who've had NDEs. And I remember reading a comment in either his channel or the Coming Home NDE channel that really just changed my life. And it said, these people who experience near-death experiences, they are our modern day prophets. And my astrological brain is like, holy moly, absolutely, because we're in the age of Aquarius. This is not like, some person that I pedestal or who I think or feel is more important than me is having these etheric experiences and coming back with messages and wisdom that are just reverberate in your soul and your body. These are just regular people. And most beings who have NDEs, at least from the ones that I've studied and I've read and I've seen on my YouTubes and my podcasts, they are oftentimes having like a super quote unquote normal life. They're not specifically spiritual. Sometimes they're actually very, very entrenched in a career or a really unhealthy trauma pattern, or they have a really, really strong faith or religious background that doesn't entertain any idea of what it is that they've experienced. So it's pretty remarkable. And Leo Max and I were having a conversation about this because he's my Scorpio love. And I was like, Leo, you got to watch. I send him the most unbelievable NDEs because I know with the work that he does and his hypnotherapy, he goes there. So I'm like, okay, I know you're going to be able to handle this one. And we were just talking about one of the most remarkable parts about listening to a near-death experience is how special and how remarkable the messages are. I also want to share that there's a book that I feel really opened my mind, my heart, my consciousness to understanding and feeling more equipped to understand the power, the peace, the love, and even mostly the neutral energy that can exist in the unseen. And what I mean by that is when you understand the spirit world and the process of the soul from a more neutral perspective versus positive or negative energy. It's not to deny positive or negative or empowering and loving versus challenging energy. But what is so special is when I've read Journey of Souls twice, my favorite book in the whole universe, and then Destiny of Souls I'm in process of reading right now. These are books by Dr. Michael Newton. Journey of Souls was the first book that he ever wrote. And just like I was mentioning about how there are people from let's say the medical world, like the lucid dying or the NDE book that I've been listening to on Audible. I don't have the names of the authors right now, but what's interesting is between the NDE book that I found on Audible, the lucid dying book that I found on Amazon, and then Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. Michael Newton also kind of stumbled upon the fact that he was regressing his clients into their superconscious mind in order to help them heal and to get better. So one thing that I'll say is if you are looking for an entry point to understand not only your own soul, but I also feel that Journey of Souls is a very powerful book to read when you are in a grief process, or if you have a really, really deep fear of loss. I find it very, very healing, very, very powerful, very beautiful read. So about 2 weeks after my dad passed away, I kept getting impressions in my mind of booking with this medium named Susan. The reason this is so special, very full circle, is that when my dad was alive, the last trip and really the last time that I ever spent with him when he was healthy was when him and my mom came to visit Mick and I when we were in Laguna. And the three of us went to dinner one night. Mick had something going on, and we were talking about like loved ones who had passed away, friends of theirs who'd passed away, different things like this. And so I started talking to them. I mean, they were very, very well aware about my mediumship stuff. My dad even made a joke last summer when we were at lunch. He was like, Tal, are you and Mick gonna have kids soon, or am I gonna have to talk to your children through your mediumship services? I literally looked at him, driest humor, didn't even crack a smile when he said that. I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, so this comes full circle in a very strong way in just a couple minutes. So basically, when they were in Laguna, we were having this conversation about friends of theirs that had passed, grandparents who'd passed, parents that had passed. I said, well, I have a medium that I really like to see. Would you guys be open to like getting a reading with her? I'll pay for it. And just so you guys can experience it. So this medium, she read me, she read my mom, she read my dad, but the whole session she talked to my dad. She brought through his mom, she brought through his brother. It was all focused on my dad. And when my mom and I had another session together with another medium named Thomas John, my grandma Lila was talking about my dad. My grandpa Herb came through and was talking about my dad. I mean, the whole other side of our ancestral line was kind of clamoring about my dad. I love that word now that Perdita used that word. They were just in the two sessions that we had, it was very focused on my daddy. And would we have known, looking back, why that would be in the bigger context of things? So very, very simply, I decided, okay, I'm going to get a session with Susan. She's typically very easy to get in to see. I booked a couple other sessions, but everybody had to like push me way down the line, probably their wait list or whatever. So I was like, okay, that's fine. And I kept hearing it in my mind just to book another session with Susan. So I am able to see her Sunday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. Just want to be specific about that. And here's what happened. The whole week before I booked this session, I kept speaking out loud to my dad. And I was like, Daddy, I need you to come through. I was like, I need to know where you are. I need to know you're okay. I'm like, I know I do this. I've brought through the loved ones of other people, but I'm scared that like you're not going to come through I was like, I just need to know you're okay. I just need to know you're okay. Where are you? And God, it's almost hard to get into all of the details of the questions I would ask and then the answers I'd receive just being out in the world. I'll share a few of them for sure, because I want you to know this is something you can do. And maybe it's something you do and you're like, oh my God, you're speaking into something I've already done and I've experienced so many miracles and magic through. Or you're like, I've never really thought of that before. So here's the thing. As I sat down to do the session with Susan, we meditated for a moment. It was a 30-minute session. And she said, who do you want to come through? And I said, my dad. I didn't say anything else. And basically what ended up happening is she started to be like, oh my gosh. And she's clearing her throat. She's like, is your throat chakra blocked? Like, are there things that you're wanting to say that you feel like you can't say right now? She goes, oh, no. Oh, no. Okay, no. Or these feel like words left unsaid. Could someone not speak at the end? And I said, my dad could not speak for the last 2 weeks of his life. And as I mentioned in the first episode, he started to really deteriorate in his ability to speak. For some reason, the way that the CLL progressed, or I don't know if it was a CLL or the lymphoma, but the way that the disease progressed, it really began to affect his vocal cords in a really big way. And that went on for months, but it got extremely bad at the end. So as soon as she said that, I was just jaw on the floor. Okay, this is it. And she said, he's really letting me know that he did not want to be an imposition at the end of his life. And it feels like a shock, like his death was a shock. He went very fast because his organs just couldn't sustain what was going on. And I just was like, I was scribing like a mad person. I was literally like, I have to drink in every single detail, because remember, if you guys listen to the first episode and what I've shared with you, you know this, but to have this be communicated to me through someone who, of course she's a medium, so this is what she does, but it was just like, just to be on the receiving end and to be in my grief and to have that come through, it was just, the tears were just streaming down my face. So without going into all of the details of the reading, very, very simply, my dad spoke extensively to my mom. My mom and dad were married for 44 years. My mom was with my dad from 22 years old until 66 years old. So they were together for 44 years. I'm also getting a little hint of inspiration here to talk to you guys more about the tarot reading, because I didn't go into deep depth about that. I wanted to, but I probably pulled on some other thought string and went in another direction. But let's see if that comes up again. It's coming through in my mind's eye right now. So very, very simply, she brought through so much about like my dad communicating to my mom. My dad had a lot of messages for me about our family and children, things that I have heard from 3 other mediums. They're always like, there's a little girl around you. There's a little girl around you. That was very profound, because I had actually done a reading right when my dad passed, just to ask how he was doing. And I got the Ace of Discs, which is angel wings. What was the middle card? The Six of Swords, science, which is about moving from one state to another. And then the third card was the Princess of Discs. She is pregnant. And then the crossing card was the Knight of Cups. And the Knight of Cups had his arm outstretched. And I noticed when I looked at the configuration of how I laid the cards, that outstretched arm with the Cancer, the crab, and the cup was touching the pregnant belly of the Princess of Discs. And I had thought, and this is a very, very esoteric thought, and something that was coming through a lot for me, where I was like, is the timing of this, is it possible that my dad will help Mick and I with our conception? And I've heard so many things about this through NDEs, especially through Teresa Caputo's work of loved ones on the other side, really helping and supporting family. And remember, like, family and the birth process, or the expansion of family and those soul agreements, sometimes it's not always with just the children that we birth through our bodies, but also these soul agreements that we have with souls, whether it be adoptive or donated sperms or sperm or eggs or whatever it may be. It's the contracts of the soul. So I'm very open to what that is going to be for us. I'm very excited. And honestly, ever since my dad died, I have had such a deeper confidence and a deeper peace, because one of the last things that we communicated to each other, because I told you the last conversation we had wasn't that great. The last time I ever spoke to my dad while he was still in his physical body, he was very upset about being sick. And he was, I think, also very scared, but it was turning into anger, because I think he was feeling a loss of control. And he said, well, you know what, Natalia, like, if there's one thing that all of this has shown me, it is how important family is. He's like, because the way Mom and Coleman, and, I haven't lived near my family in 20 years, but I was very much in touch with my dad, not towards the end. That is one of my regrets. Seeing him deteriorate and not do well was extremely hard for me. And my regret is that I was not more present. And there came a point in August, and once he was in the hospital, where he just completely released his phone. And he used to text me every single night and say, good night, babe, I love you. He did it every night. And I remember like when he was doing that, I remember being like, this is something I'm always going to remember because it was so sweet. He always said goodnight to me. And the day that he passed and I was in bed, I was like, God, I was like, Dad, am I going to be able to sleep? Like, am I going to wake up from the grief? I was like, please, like, support me. And that night, it was one of the first peaceful night of sleep that I had gotten in a really, really long time. And I just felt the presence of his soul be like, it's okay. Just sleep, sleep, sleep. There is one detail that I want to share with you, beauties, because it's very special. And then I'll finish up the mediumship and maybe a little bit about the tarot reading if that wants to come through again. But before my dad died, I wanted to talk about this in the first episode, but before my dad died, it was very powerful because I got a walking pad. We live in Palm Springs. It's hot. And I got a walking pad for my office so I could like get my 10K steps in. And I told you that there was the Saturday where I basically decided, I spoke to my dad's soul when I was driving in the car and I said, Poppy Bear, if this is your time, if it's time for you to go, you don't need to hold on. You don't need to hold on for me. You don't need to hold on for us. We are going to be okay. We are doing incredible if it's your time. And then as I spoke about, he passed 48 hours later, very swiftly, very quickly. But however, that night, Saturday night, as one does, I was walking on my walking pad, getting to my 10K steps. And because of doing the mediumship work, I've definitely noticed how there is this whole other relationship that I have to just being quiet. And I can feel when I'm doing a session or when someone's loved one is coming in, I can feel when the soul is communicating because it is a quiet that you can't put words to, for lack of a better term. It's like there is a quiet that it's a feeling. It is a quiet feeling and it is so peaceful, but it is like a space. It's like a lapse in your brain waves and your thought activity. So as I've healed my relationship to my body very much, especially this year doing one of my best friend, Crystal Williams' body reclamation course called Metamorphosis, my mediumship gifts after that have turned on a whole other level because I've ever more deeply like dropped into my body and healed my relationship to this vessel of just being like, I'm here to love you. I'm here to take care of you. I'm not here to hate you anymore. And because of that reclamation and that deeper peace, it's just felt so much easier to access when someone's loved one, because I'm not disassociated from my body. I'm not trying to escape my body. So as I'm walking on the walking pad, all of a sudden, I feel this wall of love. I have never felt anything like this in my entire life. And what was so powerful about this is that I felt it and I was like, oh, someone's here. I was like, many someones are here. This isn't just one person, one being. And I felt this wall of love behind me, the deepest warmth, the most unconditional love you can imagine. I'm just going to like be quiet for a moment so you can like tap in. Just access it. Allow it. And I just remember being like, wow, I have never felt this much love in my life. And I heard through the clear audience, Dad is going to be okay. And I don't know who this was. I don't know if it was my dad coming to let me know, because this was about 48 hours before he died, 24. It wasn't 48. It was much less than that. It was maybe my ancestors. It was maybe my grandparents, my team, whoever it was. There was a group and they came to stand behind me and hold me, because 24 hours later is when I got the call from my mom to say my dad was dying. And then that was when we just spilled into the activity to try to get to him before. What does all of this have to do with Pluto? So Pluto in astrology, it rules all this stuff. Pluto and Neptune specifically, because Pluto rules death, but death is the experience of transmutation and the understanding that when we make peace with death, we're so deeply powerful. Because usually for most of us, we limit so many things in our life because we are afraid of loss, or we're afraid of death. And it's understandable, because our ego, earth guide only, as Wayne Dyer says, cannot process death. There's no way, because to death, to transmute the physical form back into etheric form, spirit form, to release matter is to release the ego, the earth guide, to be beyond it. We need the ego, however, because the ego is how we guide and take care, for the most part, of the physical body. And the ego, I always say, if the ego had its way, it would just, it's concerned with survival, not thrival, not thriving. Pluto, in an empowered expression, is about transmutation of the ego. And doing that while we are still alive. I want to tell you another story that I think illustrates this. I was with a dear friend, a neighbor of my family's, and I asked her, all I want to talk with people about these days, I'm like, shallow conversations when you're me, just like, I have them, of course, but oftentimes with people, especially if I feel safe, I want to go deep. I want to talk about deep, real stuff. That's just how I function. And it's where I feel really good and alive. And I'm using my time properly for me personally. So we're sitting at my mom and dad's in Arizona. And I said, did you know I'm become a medium and I'm studying this and all the things I'm learning? And she said, do you want me to tell you a story? And I was like, oh my God, always. So she basically said that when her mother's father passed away, this was her, I'm not going to give away any details. I want to respect her privacy, but her mother's, so this would have been her mother. Yes. So her mother was pregnant with her sister, and her mother's father passed. And she said that her mother one day was crying and was like, Dad, where are you? Where are you? And she said all of a sudden one day, she's laying in bed, resting with her pregnancy. And she said that when her dad was alive, he used to always walk into the house, hang up his hat and yell her name and say, I'm home. And then walk over to the bed and communicate with her, chat with her, whatever. So she said that one day she's sitting in bed and she hears in her mind the whole thing play out. And she's like, oh my God, what the frick? Or she heard it out loud. I don't remember the details of this. But there's one core thing I want to communicate with this that's beautiful. And so basically, she said she heard all the things. He comes to the bed and she's like, oh my God, she's kind of freaking out. And she's like, where are you? Where are you? What happens? And all he said to her were these words. He said, there is a continuing. That's all he said. Just, there is a continuing. I'm still here. There is a continuing. Plutonic energy in astrology, Neptunian energy in astrology. Maybe I'll rename this episode. These are the parts of the human psyche, the parts of the blueprint that deeply correspond us to the other side. When we are not functioning in a healthy way as a tripart being, mind, body, soul, then the Plutonic energy, the Neptunian energy in the chart cannot function in a healthy way through the personality. Because Plutonic energy, which rules Scorpio, and Neptune energy, which rules Pisces, these are the gatekeepers, the line drawers between physical and non-physical, between matter consciousness and all-encompassing consciousness, free from matter. Pluto and Neptune are part of our blueprint. They're part of the expression of every person. But when we are living in simply the mind-body paradigm, when we are living as if we do not have a soul or we are separate from, we experience the more challenging, shadowy aspects of both Pluto and Neptune in the personality. Neptune is disillusionment. Pluto is power struggles. Oh my gosh, intensity. Both of these things exist to help us break through the part of our psyche, the part of our ego, the part of our frontal lobe that wants nothing but control. I want to share a perspective that I've had about alcohol and being someone who has struggled with their relationship with alcohol and drugs. And I no longer drink just because it doesn't make me feel good. But very, very simply, in our culture, and I'll just speak from being raised in America, I'm from Arizona. In our culture doesn't give us very many opportunities to transcend. And transcendence is what Scorpio, yes, but what Plutonic and Neptunian energy represent. Transcendence, they're part of the blueprint. And our culture specifically, I'll just speak like American culture, it doesn't really give us opportunities for that. It gives us the opportunities through alcohol, culturally acceptable transcendence, not giving it a right or wrong. This is a whole deeper, my Sag moon is about to go on 30 tangents, but whole deeper conversation. But we crave and need transcendence because we know there is more to us. And it's kind of interesting about, I know for myself that when I used to drink excessively, thinking that it was going to help me escape, if anything, it did for a little while, for a moment, but then it slammed me right back into everything that was not working about my life. Because part of the gig of being incarnate in the human form is taking care. And that's the Saturn energy, going back to the theme of this series and honoring my dad. That Saturnian energy is the counterbalance. But ironically, Saturn also rules death. It rules the reality that we do not stay here forever, no matter what. That's part of the law. We come back, yes, but in a given incarnation, and they say, where's my favorite book? The only astrology book you'll ever need, Joanne Martine Woolfolk. She actually has a very incredible statistic in there about the fact that your exact natal birth chart will not happen again for another 4 million years. Wow. So through all of this, few things I want to land, understanding through our blueprints with astrology that we have a soul, we have a spirit, we have something that animates this physical vessel. We have something that breathes life into the Saturnian realities of our life experience. We need transcendence. The prayer is that it is transcendence that serves you and is healthy to your mind, body, and soul as a whole being. And transcendence, in addition, is also the deep understanding that this is not it. There is more. There is a continuing. And through grief, I think the veil thins and we're able to access that. Of course, you don't need to experience grief to access that, but it is one of the gifts of grief that even through something that is so painful or challenging, that we have the opportunity to heal and to experience something so far beyond our left brain, our ego, our earth guide only, that reminds us that there is so much more, that we can talk and communicate with the other side, that we are supported, that we are guided, that we are so deeply held. And everyone gets to do this in their own way. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is the end all be all. That is what I love. And the rebellious side of my nature as an Aries is I love things that I can create and cultivate myself, and that I can experientially figure out on my own. So my gift to you, my loves, is that you create and cultivate a way to give this gift of knowing to yourself, to know that there is more, to know that there is more, and there is a continuing, and we can heal our relationship to loss, even though no matter what, as human beings, we will always grieve when we lose someone that we love or something that we love. This process has animated my Plutonic energy, my Neptunian energy in my chart even more magnificently. My Pluto is in the 10th house of career on my midheaven. Even talking about what I'm talking about in this series, I asked my angels, my guides, my benevolent ancestors, and the dead that support me, I asked them to support me in talking about this, because I was like, I took a big old break this year because I knew something else wanted to come through me and I had no idea what it was. But it is also can be scary to speak about things that bring you peace and that feel so real and powerful to you, but then to also share that in a way that others can experience and have their own experience with is a great act of courage and a great act of vulnerability. But as many of you know, and me having this show for a very long time, being courageous at times and being deeply vulnerable is like part of the gig for me. And that Pluto in my 10th house on my midheaven is absolutely that. In addition, my Neptune in the 12th house, being deeply animated by this grief process, has also ever deepened my relationship to the other side. The 12th house is the other side. It is the relationship to the soul, to the subconscious, to loss, to disillusionment, and most of all to transcendence. So I share that, and I hope that that makes sense, because it's really powerful how the experiences in our life, they can activate as well as strengthen the aspects of our natal blueprint and help us like grow, heal, and evolve. And the last thing I'll say, just to honor my pops, is, it's interesting that he named me Natalia, because the root word of Natalia is natal. And it's funny that all I teach about is the natal chart. So when I realized that, I was like, this is pretty incredible. So my loves, I love you guys so much. I have an invitation for you. It will just be in the show notes. I won't go too deep into it here, but I will be teaching the Saturn Plan and Prep Masterclass for 2025. We are going to master the 3 Saturnian tools that transformed my entire life, from mastering our morning to caring for our finances to stabilizing our business and our way of making heart-aligned, soul-aligned money through our gifts. It's going to be a very special 3-day masterclass experience. You'll get to work with me live. It is completely free. And this will be a segue and an invitation to join me inside of Magical Women and Money membership, which I will talk about at the very, very end of the training for anyone who's interested or who would like to go deeper and really set the stage for a remarkable 2025. I shared that story about my papa, about really that opportunity that he handed to people about paying into their future. And oftentimes we just need someone or something that calls us forward and lets us know that we absolutely can. And now is the time to take care of our finances and take care of our life in a way that supports us in creating and cultivating life on our terms. So maybe this is that invitation for you. I'd love to get to work with you live. It's going to be a really, really special 3 days. The link to join me will be in the show notes, and I cannot wait to see you, angels. I cannot wait. And I'm really excited to teach again. And I'm just excited to serve you through these tools. And we're really going to be focusing on Saturnian energy and why we have to make peace with Saturn energy, because it is like the liberator when we really work with it in the proper way. If we think Jupiter is the gift giver of our chart and our blueprint, Saturn is the gift giver that gives us our longest standing gifts. But you will go through challenge because you have to become the person who can handle the blessings that you're asking for. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. As always, it is such a privilege and an honor. I will see you in episode 3, our final episode of the Saturn series. And we're going to be talking about personal finance, smart habits, and self-discipline, all the Saturnian magic. And I just can't wait. I love you guys. I'll see you soon. Thank you for tuning in.